Shalom, and welcome to Psychology of the Parsha for Parshat Breishit, the very first Parsha in the Torah. In fact, the first book of the Torah, its namesake is Breishit. Breishit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created. And thus, the narrative goes on and on about how God created the world, how He created the first man and woman, and goes all the way through the story of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and ends with the Jews ending up in Egypt. The next book of the Torah begins with the enslavement in Egypt, and then of course the Exodus, the splitting of the sea, and the receiving of the Torah. Rashi comments immediately on the first verse of the Torah, where it begins to tell us the story of creation. And Rashi says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, that really the Torah should not have begun here, but rather with the very first mitzvah. At least the first mitzvah they received while still in Egypt, but as a nation from God. Why then did the Torah begin and continue for a very lengthy time this narrative of more of historical value, of story value? In fact, I'll ask you the question. What do you suppose would be the answer of the typical average Jew if you ask them, what's the Torah? What is the 5 books of Moses? I think most people would answer, well, it's the story about the Jewish people, it's a story about the world. There could be nothing further from the truth. In fact, the word Torah means not history or story. Furthermore, if that's what the objective was, this is a poor history book, because much detail is typically omitted, and sometimes quite often, we find detail that seems to be absolutely superfluous and unnecessary that is indeed mentioned. So it's obvious this is not a history book. This is not a book of stories. In fact, it's a book of Torah. What does the word Torah mean? Torah milashon hora'ah. Torah comes from the word hora'ah, which means directive, a teaching, a book of instructions. That strengthens the question. Why then did HaShem find it necessary to tell us all these stories? The answer is, and Rashi doesn't leave us long in suspense, and he says, Mishum, because, and he quotes the verse from the Psalms, Koach ma'asav higid la'amo. HaShem, He, revealed to His people His powerful works. The whole story about His powerful works. Why? Latet lahem nachalat goyim. In order to give them, or giving them, the heritage of nations. So this is for the purpose of, and Rashi goes into detail explaining, that if one day the nations of the world come and say, Listim atem, you are thieves. You stole the land. You guys left Egypt. You just marched into this territory, kicked everyone out, chased them out, and took over the land. You are thieves. By the way, this argument is also made, well, because you guys suffered through the Holocaust, what gives you a right to kick people off their ancestral land? And therefore HaShem made it very clear from the beginning. I own this land. In fact, I own all land. HaShem says, I am the biggest real estate tycoon. I built it all. I made it all. It's mine. I chose for whatever length of time to give it to them. And then by my choice, I decided to take it from them and give it to you. And that is not up for discussion. That is mine. Was mine, is mine, and will always be mine. And therefore, there's no argument here to be made. This is a fantastic argument, a fantastic point. But I ask you a realistic question. Are you a politician? I'm certainly not. I certainly don't have to stand in the UN and make an argument for our right, for the sake of the Jewish people living in Israel, for our right to the land. I certainly don't have to do that. Nor do I have to go to my neighbors. The Torah does not expect me to go to every non-Jew that I see and make this argument. Yet, you and I are expected to study this on a daily basis, to derive the lessons, and to live by the teachings and the ideals of the Torah. How then does this apply to me and you, to us? And the answer is that this indeed is not only a reference to a particular geographical territory. This is not talking about only a certain location. This is speaking about the life as a Jew. Eretz Yisrael is not only a certain geographical destination, but Eretz Yisrael is a concept of the way a Jew should live his or her life. Eretz, as the sages tell us, comes from the Lashon, comes from the word ratzon, which means will, desire. And Yisrael, of course, means to be in tune with God, to be in tune with the masterfulness, God Himself. Thus, Eretz Yisrael means to live with a purposeful, meaningful life in tune with the will of God. And here is the argument that the world gives to the Jew. Who are you to come and take the average, mundane, unholy things of the world, to take the basic elements of the world, to take the landly things, the earthly things, and turn it into Eretz Yisrael, make it something lofty, make it something holy? What right do you have to do that? And that's an interesting argument, which unfortunately you have over the years, over the course of history, some Jews even succumb to this, saying, when you're in the synagogue, when you're in the study hall, be the best Jew you can be. But when you're out there in the world, either engaged in business or in leisure, come on, that's a different reality. That's a reality that's not connected to Judaism. And here comes the lesson. HaShem told us how He created the world. And in every single part of creation there is a purpose. And the purpose is, although it may not always look like it or seem so, the purpose is to come back to God and to serve the purpose and the will of HaShem Himself. Thus, maybe it may seem at times that I, meaning HaShem, has chosen to give it to them, meaning to powers which seem to be separate or different from powers of holiness. But when I choose, it comes back, because the koach, the potential that I put into the world, when I created the world, is always embedded in every aspect of the world. And this psychologically is perhaps the greatest lesson that we need to have in approaching any matter of Judaism and any matter of life. How to make it purposeful and how to deal with those pushback elements that seem to be making that argument, hey, this don't belong to you. This belongs to us. This belongs to the world. This belongs to the mundane. Wishing you much success. As we begin Breishit, we begin the new Parsha, We actually are going into the real year. We're actually beginning the year. Until now, it was almost like spiritual role-playing. We had Rosh Hashanah, we had Yom Kippur, we had Sukkot, we had Simchat Torah. We were in a spiritual trance. Of course we were great. Of course we felt godliness. Now is when it really starts to matter. Now it's when we're really starting to play for real. And that's why the lesson comes now. Shalom.